So now we have this, what we call the Supreme Council of the Armed Forces, or the SCAF, basically running the country. Egypt does not have a president now. We're preparing for presidential elections. Also, we don't have a parliament now. We are also preparing for parliamentary elections. So basically, the SCAF is guarding the country in this transitional period until parliamentary and presidential elections happen, alongside also preparing for a new constitution for Egypt. Now, interestingly enough, and this is also another lesson I think that is learned from the revolution, is whatever was the common denominator for people who took to the streets for the revolution, which was the concept of change, that they were sick and tired of what was going on, that they wanted to change. People came from all different walks of life with that unified idea, change. But then since the revolution and since change has actually happened with the departure of the president, now it's time for us to know what type of change we want. And so many appear with their different models and versions of change today. And that's why what we see now in Egypt is this numerous debates about how we would like to shape the course forward. This is only natural in a healthy democracy, because you have healthy debate to discuss what you want. So this is not, it's of course unprecedented for Egypt, but it's something that I'm very optimistic about. What's interesting is, even though this debate is going on, the government itself is not just leaving itself to be stuck to this debate about people asking for, you know, we're going to have this or that or this. What they're trying to do is at least, meanwhile, do things that everybody was always calling for. Like, for example, first point was the state of emergency. Egypt was under a state of emergency for almost 3 decades. Now that means that there was an emergency law, something that a lot of people despised. The government has made it clear now, the caretaker government, that they want to abolish this emergency state. Secondly, the icons of the previous regime were not neglected. Many of them are under trial now, and you know, most important of which is the president, the former president himself, who is standing trial. Also, something that is unprecedented also in Egypt is the fact that the government has the government was adamant from day one to actually make sure that the judicial supervision of the elections will be taking place. Judicial supervision was always there in Egypt, but it wasn't in the entire process. Like in many other countries, it's not from the whole process from A to Z is never under judicial supervision, but in our case, it's going to be that way. So the whole process will be under the complete auspices of the judicial authority and completely away from any executive powers. Also, another point, which is a point of contention now, and I'm not going to shy away from it. A lot of Egyptians today are unhappy about, for example, the SCAF, the Army Council, referring a lot of civilians to military courts and not to civilian courts, feeling that this is, you know, unwarranted, and that whoever needs to be on trial should be in a civilian trial. Unfortunately, these are exceptional times in Egypt right now. When you have a revolution with this magnitude, and of course we have some security vacuum in Egypt right now, and since it's exceptional times, the military has seen that it's also best for us to act by having military courts. Now, military courts per se are not exceptional courts. They're part of the judicial system in Egypt, and resorting to them is absolutely okay. And in fact, the overwhelming majority of the cases handled now by these courts are cases of thuggery and arms and drug trafficking, people who are basically exploiting the situation now in Egypt to their favor. So the absolute majority of those are people who most of the people in Egypt want to see in prison anyway. Now, some of the cases of civilians who are taken to military courts today, some would argue, are cases of political expression. But in fact, many of them, according to Egyptian law, was not really political expression as much as it was a problem of inciting against the military and inciting violence, basically. But having said that, nonetheless, it was also interesting to see that the government itself and the military granting amnesty to many of the ones who were captured. But anyway, this is just a side point, just to show you the kind of debate and the details that Egypt is going through every day about this. So what can the US and our friends do just to be more proactive? What can we do to help Egypt? Or how do we want to see this outcome come? Positively, many of us would like not to be hostage to the political debate in Egypt. This is important because if we just continue talking about the political debate, then the transition process will only be crippled. I say that understanding that the economy is the key to the success of the transition and Egypt's future, we should be continuing. We should continue to be focused on the immediate economic concerns of Egypt. This is something that I know that a lot of American friends here understand, that basically the attention and help of our friends in the US, in Europe, and in other countries to help Egypt nurture its solid foundation of change for a future Egypt that is stronger than even before is something that is important. Any delay will only have adverse effects during that transition. Also, opportunities we believe should be promoted for Egypt, basically also to cement the transition to a healthy new page. Also, I know that with regard to foreign policy, for example, I know that there are so many who are worried about the foreign policy direction of Egypt, the direction of this new Egypt vis-a-vis the world, and especially with regard to the region and Israel. Now, the only response I can make to that right now is that our pursuit of peace and stability in the entire Middle East was always our main pillar for our foreign policy, and this will not be shaken. What was sought by the revolution, this peaceful revolution, to achieve a peaceful transformation towards democracy, freedom, dignity, and social justice, will be, in all likelihood, the same driver that for our course ahead in the promotion of similar values in our troubled region and even beyond. So, to conclude, I think we're juggling multiple priorities now in Egypt. So many things, domestic, political, economic, and of course on the foreign policy level. It is difficult, yet I'm very optimistic that the force that brought this unified Egyptian stance together in the revolution will continue to grow constructively to build a modern Egypt that we're all hoping for. But also, just as I've started my remarks, this new wind of change that came from within the region will definitely have its transformation effect in the region itself. But also, I think the world will not be immune from that. The world will also, as transformation happens in the region, will also have to change the way it views that area, the Middle East. Thank you.